Good day, everyone. Rafael John Diaz is Leopardas, reporter at East Virtual. And I have a task to give you some discussions on the topic entitled The 16th Century Timeline. But before we officially proceed, I would like to give you or to read to you the objectives of this report. The first, to learn about the mathematicians of the century. Second, to gain some learning on how this age affects the contemporary patch. The third, to know on when does the present mathematicians came from. The fourth, to savvy things from this period. The fifth, to cope some mathematical formulas of solving. And now we will officially proceed to the first mathematicians at this century. First would be Francis Vaiti. Francis Vaiti is a French mathematician, lawyer, and advisor of Kings Henry III and IV of the France. Made significant advancement in algebra and first introduced the use of letters to the present variable. Discovered the connections between roots and coefficients of a polynomials called the Vaiti's formula. And fourth, he was known as the father of modern algebraic notation. And also, he also wrote a book of the geometry and trigonometry, including the calculating of pi to the to 10th decimal place using the polygon that traces to 3, 9, 3, 2, 1, 6 sides. The next mathematician that includes at this period would be John Napier or John Napier in 1550 to 1670. He is a Scottish mathematician, physicist, and astronomer. Invented logarithm, popularized the use of the decimal. Napier's bone, a manual calculating device that helped with the multiplications and division. Study the subjects of calculation, Napier's bones, decimal fractions, and logarithm. At this slide, we will see on how Napier explained the logarithm formula. And the next one will be the Napier's bone. Then it must be used in division and multiplication. The next mathematicians would be Galileo Galilei. He is an Italian astronomer, physicist, and engineer. And also, he found the four largest moon of Jupiter, the faces of Venus, sunspots, and etc. He was sometimes called the father of the modern science and invented the early thermometer or thermoscope. He was a vocal proponent of heliocentrism, although he did not invented the telescope, but he made a significant improvement to it that enabled astronomers to observation. He was tried by the Catholic Church Inquisitions for his scientific writing in 1633. This slide explains on how Galileo Galilei is improves the world of science and also the mathematics. Next would be Johannes Kepler. Johannes Kepler is a German astronomer and mathematician, astrologer, natural philosopher, and writer of music's imperial mathematicians in Prague. Best known for his three law of planetary motion. He also worked in optics relating to the visions of an eye and improved telescope for his observation. Discovered that planet actually moved on elliptical orbit on 1609, or known as the Astronomia Nova. This picture explains on how Kepler discovered his theory. The next mathematicians will be Marie Mersenne. French mathematicians the post-box of Europe because of his frequent exchanges with the contact in the scientific world during the 17th century. Marcin's prime or prime number that can be written as 2 to the power of n minus 1. It must be used in a large amount of a prime number. And also, he also studied acoustic and the harmonic of the vibrating string and wrote about the theology and the philosophy. The next mathematicians will be Gerard Desargues from 1591 to 1661. He is a French mathematician, engineer, and architect. He designs numerous buildings in Paris and Lyon. Father of projective geometry, this special kind of geometry in which parallel lines meet at a point of infinity. The size of the shape does not matter, only their proportions. And also, all types of conic sections are essentially the same. At this slide, we will see on how these are guests evaluate the conic sections formula and shape. René Descartes from 1596 to 1650. René Descartes is a French mathematician and philosopher. one of the key figures in the scientific revolution, refuses to accept the authority of some previous philosopher. I think therefore I am is the best quote or the famous quote that he created, part of analytical geometry that allows us to describe geometric shape using the algebra. It was one of the prerequisites which allows Newton's and Leibniz invented calculus, credited with the first use of superscript for powers and exponents, and the Cartesian coordinate systems is named after him. At this slide, we will see on how René Descartes explains his formula. Next would be Paredes Fermat from 1607 to 1665. Fermat is the French philosopher and lawyer, also one of the earliest pioneers of calculus, as well as working in number theorem, probability, geometry, and optics. Optics means relating to a vision of an eye. He wrote a short note in the margin of one of his textbooks on 1637, claiming that the equation a to the power of n plus b to the power of n is equals to c to the power of n as integer solution to n greater than 2. He also had a marvelous proof, which this margin is to to contain Fermat's last theorem and one of the most famous unsolved problem in mathematics, not until proven in 1994. In this slide, you will see on how Fermat explained his theory about the calculations of calculus. The next mathematicians would be John Wallis from 1616 to 1703. Wallis is an English mathematician contributed to the development of calculus, invented the number line. The symbol of infinity was discovered. He also served as a chief cryptographer for Parliament of a royal court. This formula, or at this slide, you will see the formula that Wallis created. Next will be Blaise Pascal from 1623 to 1662. He was a French mathematician, physicist, and philosopher. Invented some of the first mechanical calculator, working on projective geometry, probability, and physics of the vacuum. Known for its discovery names a Pascal triangle and infinite triangle of numbers with some amazing properties. This At this slide, you will see the discoveries of Pascal. At the upper at the upper picture, we will see the old calculator that he may invented, and downward part picture would be a Pascal triangle. Next would be Siki Takagazu from 1642 to 1708. Takagazu is a Japanese mathematician and writer. Created a new algebraic notation, studied the Diophantine equation, also developed an infinitesimal calculus and dependency of Leibniz and Newton's in Europe. His work foundations for a distinct type of Japanese mathematics known as a wasan, and it was continued by his successor. And at this slide, we will see on how Siki evaluates his work. Next will be Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton is an English physicist, mathematician, and astronomer, one of the most influenced scientists of all time. He was a professor of Cambridge University and president of a Royal Society in London. Principia Mathematica book formulated the law of the motions in gravity. One of the inventor of calculus built the first reflections telescope, calculating the speed of sound, studied the motions of fluid, developed a theory of colors based on how prisms split sunlight into a rainbow colored or the spectrum. The picture shows on how Isaac Newton or Sir Isaac Newton evaluates his formula or his piece to contribute mathematics at this contemporary epoch. Next will be Giovanni Siva. Giovanni Siva is an Italian mathematician, physicist, and hydraulic engineer. One of his most enduring contributions to mathematics in Siva's theorem, it talks about the different line segments of a triangle. In publication in the Linist was received with a little fanfare for the reasons of his discovery were not fully recovered until 80s. At this slide, we will see on how Siva's theorem evaluated. Next would be Jacob Bernoulli from 1655 to 1705. He is a Swiss mathematician, one of the many important scientists in the Bernoulli family, having a deep academic rivalry with several of his brothers and sons, made significant advancement to a calculus that was invented by Newton and Leibniz. Leibniz, rather, created the fields of variations, discovered the fundamental constant of E, developed techniques for solving differential equations, and much more. Published the first substantial work about probability, including the permutations, combinations, and the law of the large numbers. He proved the binomial theorem and derived many properties of Bernoulli's numbers. And at this slide, we will see on how Bernoulli's formula evaluated. And this picture at the bottom, we will see three pictures, and that's a Bernoulli's brothers that made some rivalry to each other. The next will be Abraham de Moivre from 1667 to 1754. He is a French mathematician who worked in probability and analytic geometry. He is most remembered for Moivre's formula, discovered the formula for the normal distributions in probability, first conjectured the central limit theorem, also found a non-recursive formula for the Fibonacci number, linking them to the golden ratio. This slide shows on how Abraham de Moivre, known or remembered by people because of his work. The next mathematician will be Robert Simpson from 1687 to 1768. He is a Scottish mathematician, studied at ancient geometry, studied at the University of Glasgow, and later returned as a professor. Simon line of triangle was named after him, which can be constructed by the circumcircle. This slide shows us a further information about Simpson's theory. The next mathematicians will be Christian Goldbach from 1690 to 1764. He is a Prussian mathematician, also contemporary of Euler, Leibniz, and Bernoulli. Tutored by Russian Tsar Peter II, he was known for his Goldbach conjecture. And that's the end of my report. Thank you for listening.